Hello, I'm John Felt. Welcome to the Ag Weather Outlook for December 10th, 2016. Well, the focus of this briefing is definitely going to be cold, and I'm sure you've experienced it recently in most areas of the country, or certainly are going to. Really wondering if that increased snow over Siberia is serving as a cold source, and that's part of the reason that we're getting the early season cold here. I'm also starting to watch parts of the far upper Midwest, including North Dakota and lee side of the lakes. Snow's starting to pile up in a few areas. And overall, I think we're just getting much more winter-like active systems across the nation. Now, over the last week, we had some very welcome rainfall over the southeast U.S. Parts of that area were anywhere from 10 to 12 inches below normal, and some areas picked up 3 or 4, and even cases sometimes up to 6 inches above normal over the last couple of weeks. Elsewhere, fairly light precipitation in the form of rain or snow. So when we look at the percent of normal over the last week, what we see here is areas in yellow is below normal precipitation, areas in purple above normal. Now take a look at North Dakota and northern Minnesota, and those are areas that receive some snow, heavy snow in spots. Parts of the south, central, and southeast U.S., again, most areas welcome rainfall. And in the middle part of the nation, what we see is that area of yellow, and that's below normal precipitation. Now we're getting a pretty good snow cover on the ground over the upper Midwest, but it's fairly localized at this time. North Dakota, 10 inches or so, that darker shade of blue, and also lee side of the lakes. I put out a post out a while back showing how the Great Lakes were unusually warm exiting the month of November. So even though it's been cold, we still have a source of energy picking up some moisture into the lower atmosphere, and that cold air blowing over the lakes producing lee side snow. Now, one of the reasons that snow's somewhat starting to pile up is that we're not getting any melting here. This time of year, it's not all that unusual to get some snow and start to melt it. Until we get into January, that's sort of what we see in a lot of areas. And this white here, or gray, is indicating that the snow that has fallen has not really melted all that much, especially over the last 24 hours. The reason why is we're getting colder air filtering in, and basically the story is going to be one wave after another for a while that's going to be pushing in. And I think the main reason, I haven't talked about this oscillation for a while, the Eastern Pacific Oscillation, the EPO, is negative. And what we get in this type of negative EPO is we get a ridge of high pressure over the Gulf of Alaska. And as you probably know by now, is when we get a push of the jet stream in one area, it sort of digs in the other, and that's digging over the eastern half of the U.S., bringing in that colder air. And this is what we can see here. This is later this week, about a week from now, and you can see we have this strong ridge of high pressure in the Gulf of Alaska, and then it digs into this region. It's also associated with that polar vortex. I talked about that, which is displaced. That's also helping that cold air sink into the U.S. Here's the forecast for the EPO, and you can see it's highly negative. And then as we get towards late December, it starts to moderate back. So that's, I think I put a big question mark right here, but that's sort of the forecast in a nutshell right here. Very deep negative EPO and then moderating over time. And this is the type of pattern you do see with a negative EPO. You can see that cold temperatures over a large part of the U.S., but centered over the north central U.S., and the Corn Belt is definitely an area that gets pretty brutal winter conditions with this type of system. If I look at the sources of cold air, I'm still a bit puzzled by this warm pocket of air. I think that's going to have some role this winter. This is an anomaly, but this right now is the immediate feature that I'm looking at. This is a source of cold air right here. You can see by December 18th it has spread over the U.S. So we're getting one pulse after another, and that's going to be what we're going to see for the next 10 days to 2 weeks. So let's dig into the forecast a little bit more. Here's the jet stream this week. Blue, remember, is the jet stream further south than normal. We have that digging trough of low pressure, and that's going to result in colder air, and this is a 5-day average, so it's going to take a while to overspread the region. And sort of for timing, here's Tuesday, and here's the Arctic front. It extends right through across Lake Michigan down towards St. Louis, then across Oklahoma, And then look at the source of this. Here's your high pressure. The source of that cold air is right over that cold air source. It'll bring it directly down into the U.S. as the week goes on. Give you some idea of the intensity of the cold. These are morning lows on Thursday morning. You can see we have negative readings over a good part of the Great Lakes and upper Midwest, teens elsewhere, so it's a very pure Arctic air sinking to the south. Now we want to keep an eye on tracks of surface lows because that can bring us some snow. It's not going to be real active, but there is one track of a surface low associated with that front. That's going to produce some rain and some snow. Rain overall fairly modest. Here's your rainfall. Heavier over the Pacific Northwest and parts of California, Northern California. And here's your snow. This is somewhat variable, but we do have a track of snow this week along this axis right here. Also some enhanced lake effect snow. And then one of the things I didn't do, this goes through Friday. Beyond Friday, there's another system, but I just think that's so far out, I'm not going to cover it right now. There's another one coming after this one later in the week. Now, if we get into the period of the 15th through the 20th, 6 to 10 day, we still have a very similar type pattern. We have cold air that has pretty much entrenched the north central through the Midwest, Great Lakes, and even the Northeast U.S. The only area that's still remaining fairly mild is the far southeast U.S. And then as we get into the 11 to 15 day range, remember that EPO? Remember how I showed you it came back up a little bit towards normal? This is saying as we get past maybe the 10 day to 2 week period, we could start to see some moderation. Doesn't show it up here on the average. This is still the average. That's going to lag a bit. So we're looking at about 2 weeks before we see that possibility of some moderation. And that's so far out there. A little bit hard to put a lot of confidence in on that. Now, as far as precipitation, here we go this week. There's that band of snow in green. Everywhere else fairly quiet. Then week 2, we'll have to see how this works out. It shows enhanced precipitation in green. Everywhere else near normal. Okay, now beyond the first 2 weeks, this is weeks 3 and 4, and I'm just going to present this. I don't have a whole lot of confidence in this, but right now it's showing the possibility of some return to normal or even some milder weather over the southern tier of the U.S. Now, there are 2 things I want to try to get out this week to you in content. One is I did a study of very cold Decembers, what happens in January and February, and there's really not a strong correlation between that continuation of the cold. I'll show you that this week. Also, I want to show you how weak this La Nina is. There's a lot of talk about this warmth over the southern U.S. due to La Nina. I'm a little skeptical, and I think this next post I'm working on will be talking about that as well. So as far as hazards go this week, definitely going to be the brutally cold weather over a large part of the nation. There will be some heavy snow in spots, modest snow in other areas, but mainly the heaviest snow along the Great Lakes, lee side of the Great Lakes. So like I said when I started the briefing, I think the main threat, the main topic, the main focus probably for the next 2 weeks will be brutal early season cold. It's going to last most of the month, but I do think as we get towards Christmas, beyond Christmas, that's our next chance of maybe a break from this pattern. And I'll be looking at that and passing that along when I see it. But right now it looks like that negative EPO is going to dominate for the next 2 weeks. Looks very cold. After that, I think we could see some moderation, and that'll be the next point. Be very interesting to see if we do break and get back to a different type of much more welcome pattern. Anyway, bundle up this week, stay warm, and I'll be filling you in throughout the week with a lot of content. Okay, take care.